Oddworld, a planet vastly covered in history, turmoil, and secrets. The world of which is first established through Abe, the prophesied messiah of his people. Through a small window that is the Oddworld games, we have only seen a glimpse of what Oddworld has to offer. Oddworld is a vastly deep planet, and its history equal in compare. Yet much of this knowledge lays untouched and unknown to the humble player. Hello everyone, my name is Insomniac, and tonight I have a very special video for you. Nemin, who some of you may recognize from the Oddworld community, has asked me to collaborate with him on a very unique project of his. In this video, I'm going to cover a list of Oddworld lore he has conveniently laid out in an Iceberg format, ranging from common lore, that is the ice on the surface, information that all Oddworld fans and people outside would likely know about, to unheard of lore, which is located at the furthest and darkest depths. Now, this video took a big effort on multiple people's parts, notably Nemin's, as he organized all the information in this video, and has provided links to various articles and videos if you want to learn more about the topics I discussed today. Additionally, there are a few creative art pieces made specifically for the video, and other artworks and soundtracks have been given permission to showcase. So, a big shout out to all the artists involved. I'll link their media outlets in the description below. So, if you enjoy this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and check them out for yourself. Now without further ado, let's get into the video. The surface. Now I'm not just going to throw you into the deep end without knowing which way is up, though arguably that could be a lot of fun. But no, first we have to scratch the surface to uncover the gritty details hiding within. On the surface lays all the knowledge as easily obtainable as crashing into an iceberg itself.
Is there anyone there?
Yes, what you see.
Iceberg, right ahead!
Thank you.
Mudokons descend from birds. Yes, as strange as that sounds, Abe and the rest of his species originate from birds, which explains why when he dies he emits birds from his body. As a child, I interpreted this as symbolic imagery for his soul's freedom, that his spirit was finally free from the chains of slavery and destiny. Alf has confirmed it multiple times in his readings that Mudokons are in fact descended from birds. However, with all the bee imagery in SligStorm, this might soon be subject to change. I myself align with the birds and the bees theory, which harmonizes both the current origin of the Mudokons and the possible new origin. It's also a funny gag on the infamous talk. Other key factors of the Mudokons' avian ancestral heritage includes their feathered heads, fragile bone structure, cultural attire, and of course the bird portals, which when used allow transport for any mud that leaps through. It's like flying, but instantly. For more on this topic, there is a link in the description below. SligStorm. SligStorm was a bonus game the senior game designer Paul O'Connor envisioned to be included in an Abe's Odyssey Abe's Exoddus re-release. This however never happened. If you're curious about more details, Nemin has a video that I'll link in the description below. But to summarize, the game centralizes around an albino Slig who is ostracized by his own, and you must help him survive the breadth of the game, which was estimated to be the length of the Slig Barracks chapter in Abe's Exoddus. The Hand of Odd. Like SligStorm, it is also a cancelled game. It would have been a real-time strategy, RTS for short, with three sides fighting against each other. After a fateful encounter between Oddworld inhabitants founder Lorne Lanning and the CEO of Activision, Bob Kotick, the game was cancelled. You can hear more about it in another video Nemin made that will also be linked below. Gluckons walk on their hands. This one is quite obvious to anyone who ever finished Abe's Odyssey. Under their suits, Gluckons really just walk on their absurdly long arms, their feet uselessly dangling from their body. As Abe once said, the Schism. The Schism is a particularly noteworthy event in Oddworldian time. Long ago, the Mudokons were a respectable race that was equally spiritual as they were exalted in Oddworld society. The Gluckons were also a highly spiritual race, but there came a time where they gazed upon the science of alchemy. At some point in this period, a moon appeared with the Mudokon paw etched on its face. The Mudokons took this as a sign of total superiority, thus angering the Gluckons. In their anger, the Gluckons tried to disprove this ideal with their recently acquired alchemical skills. to which an unspecified cataclysmic disaster struck and nearly wiped out all of the Glukkons. Unsuccessful, they declared hate for the moon and locked themselves away. And eventually, due to their enclosurous ways, they evolved into the vile creatures we see today. Hell-bent on dominating the world, going as far as to enslave the Mudokons and erasing their history. One evolutionary feature of the Glukkons is their glowing eyes, though it appears in SligStorm this is no longer the case. Abe and Munch's fun adventures. A commonly quoted anecdote talks about how a representative from Microsoft recommended Oddworld inhabitants to name Munch's Odyssey this name. Obviously, they declined. The Quintology. The Quintology is the name of the main Oddworld series. Currently, there are two groups of games that fit this name, one being Abe's Odyssey and Munch's Odyssey. These two are regarded as the old Quintology, and New and Tasty and SligStorm being the new Quintology. Similarly to the word trilogy, the Quint part refers to the fact that the 5 games are planned to form the series. Roid. Roid was a planned alter ego for Munch, who after receiving experimental steroids from the Vikers became half meek Gabbit and half muscle-bound murder machine. Whenever Abe needed a blunt approach to a situation, he would have simply slapped Munch silly until the poor guy snapped from the abuse. This mechanic, however, was cut from the final game. However, we do see its likeness in the big bro Sligs, who are larger variants of the Sligs we encounter in Abe's and Munch's Odyssey. These big bro Sligs are on a strict chem diet of testosterone and steroids, likely the same ones Munch was to receive. Abe's loss of a finger. 4-fingered characters are frowned upon by Japanese audiences, as, historically, there was a subclass of workers that often lost their fingers in work-related accidents. Later on in history, a hand sign was coined in Japanese society similar to that of giving one the bird, utilizing 4 fingers instead of just your middle finger. Due to the insulting nature of this classist symbol, companies who wish to feature their products containing such characters must pay extortionist prices. Because Oddworld didn't have the money and thought it played into Abe's story of oppression and his background in slave labor, Mudokons lost a finger in Abe's Exoddus. Squeak's Odyssey. Squeak's Odyssey was the third playing game in the old Quintology. The game's plot is as old as Abe's. However, with the recent plans of the Quintology being 5 Abe games, the character's chances of appearing are extremely slim. If you'd like to read more about Squeak, I'll link an article Nemin wrote about him in the description. Now we know where the lifeguard is, it's time to venture into the shallow waters. This is where the lore that only fans who consume Oddworld related media or are especially perceptive know about reside. The Paramonian Trial Mudokon Duplication Glitch. This is a fairly easy glitch to exploit, where if you leave the trial before finishing it, then return, you're able to save 3 Mudokons again and again. This way, it's easy to achieve a Mudokon saved count higher than 99. It is also possible in Abe's Exoddus to return to Slig Barracks and Boneworks multiple times simply by recatching the trains, thus allowing you to rescue even more Muds. Or kill them, if that tickles your fancy. Craig the Slig. Craig was a character featured in Dear Alf. He is a Slig reporter for the Daily Deception who supposedly lost one of his arms at a freak gambling machine accident. His replies to fan questions allowed us to peek a bit into the industrialist world. Spruce is basically drugs. While it's never directly said, Alf alluded towards the fact that Spruce has psychedelic properties, and the fact that it expands Abe's spiritual capabilities basically confirms that Spruce is Oddworld's equivalent of LSD and similar substances. Perhaps the Abe's and Munch's Fun Adventures title wasn't such a bad pitch after all. Abe's Oddworld Odyssey. Interestingly enough, if you Alt-Tab out of Abe's Odyssey on the PC, the game's window is titled Abe's Oddworld Odyssey. Whether this was a mistake from Digital Dialect, the company who ported the games to PC, or an intentional change is not known.
Goodbye.
Wilden. Wilden was a friendly Slig whose cruel fate was mentioned in Dear Alf. For showing mercy to Abe and his friends, he was beaten to death using his own hands by the rest of his peers. This being a fairly gruesome fate, even by Oddworld standards. Scuba Toads. Scuba Toads are a cut species from Stranger's Wrath. Not a lot is known about them, but they appear in some concept art. Abe's Odyssey level continuity. The day and night cycle is largely preserved in Abe's Odyssey. Abe escapes through the stockyards at night, then spends the morning traversing Paramonia. Later he goes through Scrabania in the afternoon, and then finally returns to Rupture Farms on the next night. Abe is an absolute unit for accomplishing such a feat. Vikers are hermaphrodites. The Vikers are a species hermaphroditic in nature, or intersexual, and unlike Gluckins, Sligs, and Medokins, who have queens that lay eggs, Vikers reproduce with themselves, as horrible as that sounds given their frail bodies, whiny voices, and self-inflicted life-extending surgeries. This also implies that they birth clones, as there is no external input in the birthing process to mix genetic code. These egocentric creatures are only willing to reproduce with themselves, as their hearts have no room for anyone else, except perhaps the love of their work. Citizen Siege. Citizen Siege was a movie planned by Oddworld inhabitants, which touched upon similar topics as the game series, while not actually happening in the Oddworld universe. This idea actually predates Oddworld, and was one of the stories Lorne used to convince Sherry McKenna to co-found Oddworld Inhabitants. The Shrink. The Shrink is a character only appearing if one saves every Medokan in the PlayStation version of Abe's Oddysee. It is a large robot attached to a mechanical arm dangling from a system in the ceiling with several surgical devices that gives Abe a good fright. It was also used as promotional material for the game, but was not aired for obvious reasons. There are a few other angels operating about Oddworld, with their primary task being to keep the well-being of their subject high and their production rate optimal. Asterix Mussolini reference. One of the posters in Fico Depot is a direct reference to the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini, who similarly claimed to have made the trains run on time. Incidentally, this aids Abe in the destruction of the SligStorm Brewery franchise. Nullabab. Nullabab is the capital city of the Magog cartel, and is built into a giant crater in the earth. It has only previously appeared in interviews. In 2019, Lorne Lanning held a 1-hour Q&A on the game's official Discord, where he claimed Nullabab would be featured in the 5th game of the series. It is possible Nullabab is inspired by the great city of Babylon, as they are the same but backward in writing. It could also have biblical resonance, as Babylon is noted as a place of evil mentioned in the Book of Revelations in the Bible, and it's likely that Nullabab homes many of the more corrupt species of Oddworld. An example of such monstrous creatures are the queens of the Magog cartel. Abe's Oddysee movie. Other than just games, Oddworld inhabitants also intended to create movies from the Oddworld story. While these never saw the light of day, there are parts of the storyline posted online, along with some concept art that lets one piece together the plot somewhat. Nemin has a link for you in the description for more. Reason for Meech's extinction. If one reads a few developer interviews, it turns out Oddworld inhabitants in fact had a fully functioning prototype of Meech's in Abe's Oddysee. However, it soon became apparent that the game wasn't going to fit on the CD in its current state, so something had to be cut. Unfortunately, this something ended up being the Meech's, whose disappearance was cleverly incorporated into the game's actual storyline. Mudombies. Originally, Mudombies were intended to be NPCs in Abe's Exoddus. They are zombie Medokans whom Abe would have needed to lead to their resting place. Albeit, this concept was buried, and in the end the developers replaced them with spirit locks. In Munch's Oddysee, Abe's health was going to tie into his physical appearance. The closer he got to his deathbed, the more he would have looked like a rotting corpse himself. The Deep Waters. Here is where we start to get into the topics that only veteran fans or long-time Oddworld forum members know of. Sligfur. Oddworld forum veteran and ex-Jaw employee Will claims that Lanning originally envisioned Sligs with thick pig-like fur, but without the appropriate rendering technology, they ended up being naked. Gabbit reproduction cycle. The ending of Munch's Oddysee left it quite vague as to what exactly will happen to the Gabbiar now that Abe and Munch have saved the unborn Gabbits. The fate of the new Gabbit generation would have been uncovered in Munch's Exoddus, a game that was never made, in which Abe and Munch took a pilgrimage to Marspar, a holy place of the Gabbits and the only location where their eggs can be fertilized. Wage Wars. Wage Wars is an unreleased game whose purpose would have been to promote Citizen Siege, the movie I mentioned earlier. Wage Wars was to be an online game, and both were very close in the pipeline to start production, but supposedly due to the economic crash of 2008, Oddworld Inhabitants was not able to go ahead with the film, thus leaving Wage Wars to the dogs. Habitales and Fairy Tales. Both of these titles were playing games. Habit tales would have focused on the day-to-day life and survival of characters in a simulated environment, while fairy tales would have presented the spiritual side of Oddworld. It also would have explored more detective and thriller-like themes. Dripping characters. Oddly enough, on several pieces of concept art, characters seem to drip from their genitalia and the surrounding areas. The reason for this was never really explained, so we'd like to leave it up to you to decide the meaning of this seemingly unnecessary art direction. Hollow Oddworld. In an interview, Lorne Lanning said he imagined Oddworld as a planet that experienced heavy tectonic activity that caused layers of the earth to sink into the ground, creating different layers on which different creatures, including those of the head honchos of the Magog cartel, live. Different layers of the planet have their own atmosphere, temperatures, and even gravity. A lot of the cartel's society is made up of creatures that need damp, warm environments, and so a lot of these holes are perfect for such ilk. Lanning has even gone on to say that the surface area of the planet as a whole is roughly 10 times the size of Earth's. Not the actual size of the planet, just the amount of land as a whole. Bone products. In Abe's Exoddus, there was an unused bulletin post in Boneworks that listed some products manufactured by director Flegg. Among these products was the Bone Powder Keg, which we see its likeness in Munch's Odyssey. These explosives are likely to utilize Madogan bone powder, but it isn't stated if these explosives are in fact the same munitions distributed by Boneworks. Another product listed here are the fossil fingers. Perhaps Abe's additional phalanges met a similar fate. The Kool-Aid Man Barrel. Deep within SligStorm Brewery there is a barrel that bears a striking resemblance to the Kool-Aid Man's face. Have you ever noticed it? Mullick's Trial. In the original plot of Munch's Odyssey, Mullick is revealed to have survived the Rupture Farm's uprising and was captured and set on trial for his mishaps. His fate is left unknown, but it's quite likely, as it is heavily implied, that he would have been executed as a scapegoat. Perhaps now, however, in SligStorm, he has been given a chance at redemption and must capture the renegade terrorist Abe to redeem himself. Alternatively, he could just as easily be a fugitive himself, running against the clock to prove his innocence.
Alright, now I want your slick pals positioned all around this place, cause we are not letting that Abe guy get away from us again.
Chroniclers. Chroniclers are an industrialist race known for their roles in court and finance. They are highly intelligent and efficient. Alf has even gone on to say that they make good middle managers. Interesting to note that some in the Oddworld community have been given the title of Chronicler due to their efforts in establishing, maintaining, and making easily accessible information about Oddworld. Gorman Disenza. A fatal viral disease that appears to only inflict the highly affluent members of Oddworld society. A disease with no discrimination other than hierarchical prominence. It is said that the blood of the Gabbits possibly contains the only cure for this disease, and with the Gabbit population greatly diminished, with a minute number remaining, a cure seems far out of reach. The name is derived from the term to gourmandize, meaning to eat excessively. Metaphorically, this may mean that the wealthier folk of Odd have consumed far too much of Oddworld, and that it is now fighting back in its own way. Interesting to note, within the Oddworld forums, to be given an infraction by moderators is to be given Gorman Disenza, Queens of the Magog Cartel. Many who have played Munch's Odyssey and are familiar with Mullick's Trial know of Lady Margaret, one of the Queens of the Cartel, and is currently in need of new lungs. More likely than not due to her lungbuster addiction. After all, it's in the name. Coincidentally, research funded by her grandmother to find a cure for Gorman Disenza, the aforementioned affliction Lady Margaret's grandmother suffers from, revealed Gabbit lungs could be a viable substitute for Lady Margaret's condition. On the surface, Lady Margaret appears to be the one in absolute power, but through the haze of smoke there are more strings being pulled. Lady Margaret's predecessor is a matriarch hell-bent on domination who is willing to go to extremes to overcome her ailment, and likely any other obstacle. The lady's grandmother has an estimated time of 90 days left in the old ticker, and so is currently cryogenically frozen until a cure is found. Fortunately, for everyone else's sake. At this point in time, she has been on ice for over 100 years and will remain so it seems, as Gabbits are required to continue research and are on the verge of extinction. The only one left, it seems, being eyed up by her granddaughter. If Abe's Mudokon uprising prevails and becomes a problem Marge can't handle, her grandmother may have to be disturbed from her life-supporting slumber. With her personally funded research of Gabbits being halted due to their near extinction, putting her very existence at risk, coupled with a slave rebellion tipping the industrialist world into chaos, one can scarcely imagine the unbridled rage that would be unleashed onto the inhabitants of Odd. Abe Yawn Dub Bin. Abe Yawn, Abe Rub, and Abe Stretch are unused animations in Abe's Odyssey that were for some reason not cut from the game's files, yet unused. Glockdaguy's role in industrialist society. In an interview, Lorne Lanning explains how Glockdaguys are in fact occult creatures, whom serve masters who enter into contract with them. Lanning equates these dark magical creatures to jinns in Arabic folklore. These Glockdaguy possess demonic powers, much like how the Mudokons possess shamanic powers, one of these abilities being able to cast their physical form into an ethereal state. According to Lorne, Glockdaguy are the result of genetics and occultism. Glockdaguy are simply a hybridized creature formed from Gluckons and Octoguy. Must be where the name is coined from as well. There are no specifics, but theories say a male drone Gluckon is involved in the process, and with the aid of dark occult ritualism, anything goes. The original Abe's Exoddus plotline. The original plot of Abe's Exoddus wasn't written by Lorne Lanning, but rather the trio of Paul O'Connor, Chris Olm, and Rob Brown. Lanning wasn't very pleased with their plan, so he wrote a different storyline, while keeping some of the motifs of the original. The cut features of Munch. Munch was planned to be quite a different game. There are way too many things cut from its name here, including the aforementioned Roid, Munch taming wildlife, him being a tapeworm, and a lot more. Nemin has an article for you in the description where you can read more. New and Tasty poster. In Zulog 3, one can see a tattered and old poster of New and Tasty. This is very odd, as by the game's storyline, Mullock just announced that they're going to produce Mudokon Pops. Whether this is just a miscommunication between an artist and the writers, or has darker implications, is unknown. And here we arrive, at the bottom of the iceberg. It would take a true veteran and patient mind to uncover the knowledge that lays waiting, writhing in the dark. Hardly anyone knows about these topics. Sources are scarce and research requires determination and knowing the right places to look, and the right people to ask. So lucky you know us, eh? Abe's Odyssey found source code. Back in 2016, Oddworld inhabitants announced that they found the source code of Abe's Odyssey, and that they were excited to share more about it. This sadly never happened, and the status of the code is left unknown. Epic 1. As some people know, before Abe's Odyssey got its final name, its work-in-progress title was SligStorm. However, what even fewer know is before the name SligStorm was conceived, the game was simply referred to as Epic 1. Now it seems the latest entry in the series pays homage to the progress title. Odd how things work out in the end. Xmob and Oddmobb. Oddmobb was a company Lorne Lanning created around 2010 to 2011, after Oddworld inhabitants disbanded due to the commercial failure of Stranger's Wrath. As Lanning retained the rights to the games, he was able to re-release them on Steam using this company. He was also trying to pursue other projects under this banner, including Xmob, which he described as a massively multiplayer social media platform. Lanning imagined it as an environment reminiscent of Second Life, but on a much greater scale and with the intent of turning Facebook and YouTube into a far more gamified form of media. Obviously, such a thing would have been practically impossible to accomplish at the time, and arguably still would be, so the project was later shut down and scrubbed from the Oddworld portfolio. Antisocial Network. The Antisocial Network was another venture of Oddmobb Incorporated. Lanning describes it as the place you're going to find your real enemies, then lock and load. This project also never saw the light of day, and exists only as vague references on some obscure forums and on the Oddworld library. William Anderson. William Anderson is a pivotal figure of Oddworld's history. He was the manager of interactive design at Oddworld Inhabitants during its infancy, who helped to nail down much of the game's well-loved mechanics. His name is not found in the credits or anywhere else despite his contributions. For more about this story, please read the article Nemin has linked below. Even Worse Wieners. The name refers to a location in the Game Boy Advance version of Munch's Odyssey. Recently, a fan-made mod for Abe's Odyssey of the same name appeared, created by Oddworld forum user Episodic. Demolition Man. Demolition Man was a game for the Sega Genesis created by Alexandria Incorporated. some of whose members eventually became part of Oddworld inhabitants. The game's engine served as the base for Alive, the engine under Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exoddus. Fangus Clot is not Oddworld. Fangus Clot was a game Oddworld Inhabitants was planning to create using Stranger's Wrath's engine, featuring a shepherd who has to fight for his life against a heavily armed mafia, but is forced into slavery as a pit fighter. In one match, his opponent bites him and he contracts rabies. Through this, he escapes and must free his people before he succumbs to the infection. The game originally would have been part of the Oddworld universe, however, this was eventually changed when it supposedly shifted direction, much to Lanning's dismay. However, it was all for naught, as the whole project was cancelled not much later. Pound Dog. Pound Dog was a non-Oddworld game, and by some sources, a movie, that Lorne Lanning wanted to make. Not much is known about it other than it would have been a game about dogs, and that it was sweet and cute, however also dark, intense, and urban. The project is only mentioned in the two quotes that you can read below. Mullock's Vault. You can find this vault both in Abe's Odyssey and New and Tasty in a secret area. It's said in the original plot of Munch's Odyssey, Mullock would have returned here to recover something, and Munch and Abe would have seen its wreckage too. The Munch demo footage was faked. As explained in the book Game of X, most of the demo footage we've seen of Munch's Odyssey were in fact mock-up animations intended to show how the developers imagined the game to look like. Instead of actual in-game footage, as many believe them to be, they were faked because it was illegal at the time to show game footage for anything on the PlayStation 2. These clips were made to prevent Oddworld Inhabitants' new publisher at the time, Infogrames, from budget cutting them. These legal visualizations blew up in the media and essentially poison-pilled the publishers, allowing them to continue with Munch on the original budget. Munch runs on the same engine as Morrowind. As absurd as it might sound, both games use the Gamer.io engine. The upgraded version of this engine was used to create Skyrim. It really is a small world after all. Literally, the render distance explains a lot. Almighty Raisin and the Rats. First appearing in Munch's Odyssey, the Almighty Raisin is a 14,400-year-old seed-like creature that is so exceptionally wise, Madokans hold him at a near-religious level. According to Alf, originally the Almighty Raisin was part of an elder tree, residing in a forest far north of the continent of Mudos, where he spent the first 6,000 years in this form, before transforming into what he is today. Through astral projecting himself onto the rats, little creatures by the thousands you may notice through Munch's Odyssey's cutscenes, he can see the world. He is also said to be highly empathetic of all Oddworld's inhabitants, and he has seen a vision foreshadowing a terrible doom. His purpose? To establish a peaceful and harmonic future for Mudos. Stuart Gilray's plan for the Quintology. The CEO of Jaw stated it several times that he intended to make SligStorm in the hand of Odd, and that he also wanted to recreate Abe's Exoddus similarly to New and Tasty, then use the combined profits to create Squeak's Odyssey and finish the Quintology. With Oddworld Inhabitants' separation from Jaw around 2015, this plan was obviously foiled and instead we got, or rather will be getting, Soulstorm. Welcome to the depths. Obscure jokes and straight up fabrications. The kind of stuff you trip on blindly swimming around in the dark. The things that appear on this level are a reflection of the Oddworld fandom and a bit of fun poking at the Iceberg format itself. Abloss.exe. Of course no such thing exists. The executable of Abe's Odyssey on Windows is labeled abewin.exe, which Nemin figured the opposite of that name sounds kind of like a creepypasta. Oddworld. Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey is a recent addition to the long-running Mario franchise that amusingly also features the possession of other characters, and also bears the Odyssey name. This prompted a few fans to question the obviously non-existent link between the two games. Abe in coma. In Abe's Odyssey, Abe hits his head and supposedly dies. What if in fact everything that happened afterwards is just his delusions while he lays dying in a coma, with Big Face watching over him hopelessly? No? Not taking? Yeah, fair enough. This one too is just a poke towards tired creepypasta tropes. Brain slugs. To make a long story short, fans wanted to know more about Squeak, the third character in the Quintology. Alpha in his letters responded saying that Squeak used brain slugs to control his enemies, a joke and nod to the Futurama series. To this answer, and fans believing it to be true, included this false factoid in the wiki, leading to a mass spread of misinformation across the community. If you're interested to know more, please see the video Nemin has linked or read his article about Squeak. The 1997 Demo 1 Out of Bounds Phantom. This one too is a complete fabrication. You're not able to go out of bounds by default in the demo, and even if you did cheat your way outside, you're not going to find anything. Nothing at all. The Twice the Flavor Wikipedia incident. Twice the Flavor is a work in progress Abe's Exoddus fan remake, financed by a self-described speedrunner and well-known fan, who added the game to the Wikipedia page of Abe's Exoddus. As such edits are not exactly welcome, this was quickly removed. However, the editor attempted to add it again multiple times, only for it to be removed thereafter, as seen in the page's edit history. The slig weapon is called Blunderbuss. This one is a commonly quoted factoid, mentioned at several points in the Oddworld fandom. Yet, no one can ever point towards the source of this claim. It is thus one of the oldest pieces of fake trivia that the fandom can offer. Though, if one knows the mechanics of a blunderbuss and has ever been unfortunate enough to be on the receiving end of a trigger-happy slig, you'll know that the weapon of choice for the common slig and a blunderbuss are not one and the same thing. The blunderbuss is the ancestor to the shotgun, and while the slig's guns may look like such weapons, they do not behave to the same caliber. In saying all this, however, in SligStorm it seems that sligs carry an array of weaponry, and included in their arsenal is a buckshot-based firearm. Vaping Gluckins in SligStorm. This one is also a fabrication. We have no reason to believe the Gluckins in SligStorm will vape, but seeing how modernized the game looks, Nemin figured it sounded like a plausible change.
No way.
Opal Farm Spit Roast innuendo. In Oddworld Stranger's Wrath, outlaw Meagly McGraw, who is a known opal connoisseur, takes control of Farmer Beak's opal farm in a hostile takeover, resulting in the death of Farmer Beaks, his workers, and family. Outside the front of the house you can find one headless chicken being cooked over a spit. This could quite possibly be Susie Ray, Beak's daughter, and the only other family member ever mentioned. Not only can this be inferred as a sexual innuendo, but is also a pretty bad way to go. Designer near suicide incident. This one is an intentionally dramatic phrasing of an otherwise not as extreme event. When Paul O'Connor pitched the first story plan for Abe's Exoddus, Lorne really didn't like it. So he ended his developer blog by saying he was about to jump out a window. That level of rejection sounds as bad as being slapped in the face by a Madokin. Seriously, those hands are huge, and will leave a mark. Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exoddus were created with Paul's level editor. Paul is an Oddworld forum veteran who created the well-known Oddworld mapping tool. This faked fact claims that his tool was used to create the original levels too. This of course is not true. Data mined Gabbit model in Abe's Odyssey. No such thing exists, albeit what might surprise you is that Munch's story existed in one way or another before Abe's Odyssey even came out, as recalled by Lorne Lanning in the excerpt below. Meech demo footage. Despite rumors, no public in-engine footage exists of Meech's. Our only knowledge about them comes from concept art, some tidbits from developers, and of course the intro of Abe's Odyssey. SligStorm ARG gameplay demo. This is just a joke towards the fact that ARG largely petered out without much fanfare or satisfying conclusion at the end. ARG was a way for Oddworld inhabitants to stay active in the community, as well as providing content to engage fans until SligStorm was finished. Unfortunately, however, gameplay was first shown in 2019, long after the ARG had ended. Mulatokans. An ancient party tribe of Madokin that inhabited the Deep South. Known of course for their partying, but also more noticeably, if you're deaf and not blind, their mohawks. Some say due to neglect of their tame slogs, they became the hostile creatures you encounter today. Blue Gluckin is a long-running gag in the Oddworld forums, after it was noticed the mysterious blue liquid seeping out of the toilets in SligStorm Brewery. The term was quickly coined and has been used on numerous occasions. I personally subconsciously assumed for years it was blue-tinted rust due to high levels of chloride, chemical cleaner left by a scrub, or the remains of a fleech too spoiled by its owner to fit down the drain. But Gluckin defecation is much funnier. And there you have it. Nemin and I hope you found this a highly educational and interesting video. If there are any other topics you'd like to see us discuss, let us know in the comments, and if this video gets enough likes we will endeavour to do another one. Possibly. Maybe. At some point. Again, massive shoutouts to everyone involved. Working with you all has been an absolute pleasure. Be sure to check out everyone below to see their amazing content, and if you want to know more about the topics we went over, check the description for links or feel free to chat with us in the comments. And until next time, I hope you all have a good day and a good night. Bye bye.
You're not part of the original machine.